This is Alan Elsner, the Vice President of Communications for J Street, and our guest today is Knesset member David Tsur, who is with us on a brief visit to the United States and sitting here in the J Street office. We have to make this a very short and sharp conversation. It will last half an hour exactly because Mr. Tsur has to catch a train. But let me just quickly introduce him. David Tsur is a member of the Knesset for the Hatnuah Party. He was born in Istanbul, Turkey, and came to Israel at the age of 6 and settled in Ashkelon. He began his career in the Israeli police in the counterterrorism unit. In 2000, Mr. Tsur became chief of staff in the Ministry of Public Security, and he served as the commander of the Israeli border police from 2002 to 2004. And he also told me that he was the police chief for the city of Tel Aviv. So welcome to J Street, and it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's begin by me just asking you in the most general terms to give us a brief outline of the situation in Israel and in the region as you see it following the events of the summer, the Gaza war, also the collapse of the Kerry Initiative.
Okay, it's a little difficult even to put it in a few minutes because I think we are facing a very, very dramatic changes in the region. On the rising of the extreme radical Islamic, ISIS, and other groups of Al-Qaeda, which are more and more coming close to our borders. This is in one hand, especially on the north. We see some Salafist groups, split groups from the same roots of Sunni, which are very much powerful in Sinai with Egypt. And we're cooperating with them on that because we have the mutual interest to eliminate them. This influence on the Hamas, because Hamas is coming from the same, again, roots as the Sunni Muslim Brothers group. And the last summer, the cycle of violence, I've been asked so many times whether it was planned by them or it planned by us. I really think that Hamas was pushed into the corner, and when they started to launch the missiles, it was from a position which they were kind of frustrated by the fact that they are not getting the money to supply 40,000, which are
Public employees, but which mainly are motorists and people who are fighting for them. Qatar is the main supplier, but the channels for bringing the money were kind of blocked from the interest of Abbas, first of all, and then also Israel. So this is important to understand because Abbas had to take some measures in order to influence and to show his power after this unity government, which he wanted to see also the changes from this unity government. And Hamas wanted to move the same it was before, keep the control on Gaza, but to get the money only from Qatar and through the Palestinian Authority. And this is something which is still struggling Abbas with them. And I think it was the first time which also Israel went into this war, which not all the cards are in the Israeli hands. Egypt have his interest also, blocking the tunnels, which Morsi didn't have. For Morsi, it was kind of a highway, and it was in his interest to strengthen Hamas, not the interest of Morsi, of course, because Hamas is supplying the main weapons. You mean Sisi?
Sisi, yeah.
Sorry.
Said what?
You said Morsi, sorry.
No, Morsi had the incentive to do it, and Sisi stop it.
Yes.
Hamas is the main supplier for the weapons for the Salafi groups, Al-Qaeda in Sinai, which again wants to hit and they're killing officers and police officers and soldiers in Sinai. So we can see that all that arguments brought to a point which Hamas had to explode, and we had this war coming in the summer. Without going into details or how was it handled, but I think in general our party kind of supported more, let's say, moderate and wise way of handling it by the Prime Minister and by the Ministry of Defense, and not moving to the place where Lieberman or Bennett wanted to see elimination of the Hamas. So Tzipi had a very important role in the cabinet.
And when you say Tzipi, that's just clarify for our viewers who may not know, although most of them probably do, that we're talking about the head of the party, Justice Minister Tzipi Livni. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so she had a very important role in that cabinet members which had to raise their hands whether to move more foot on the grounds into Gaza or to remain on the bombing from airplanes, and also to do very limited moves in the ground, like elimination of the tunnels, the terror tunnels, and some of the areas which Hamas is controlling very close to the border. And not like Lieberman and maybe Bennett wanted to just to invade to Gaza, to eliminate Hamas regime, and somebody will take over. And this somebody is a big question, so I'm not sure it was a very wise way of handling it by them.
We were chatting before, and you said that you thought there would be another peace initiative or a return to the negotiations before the end of the Obama administration, which many people here in the United States are skeptical about. Could you explain why you think that the negotiations will in fact be renewed?
First of all, I think it's the interest of the Israelis to separate from the Palestinians, period. And when I'm saying it from a position, which this is of course my political vision, but also from 30 years in uniform, fought against them. I know the streets of Gaza, maybe some places better than the streets of Tel Aviv, which I live. I can tell you that there is no military solution to control 4 to 5 million Palestinians in the territories in Gaza and also in East Jerusalem in some places. So for the interest of Israel, we have to come to a point that we are separating from the Palestinians. Peace is a very big word, you know. I can't tell you that it can be on a peace agreement because the narrative of the states are so far to come to kind of an agreement. Abbas is holding the narrative of the Nakba, which were they deported from 48, etc. And he wants to see all the right to return from refugees. And our right parties, including some of the prime minister, believe is that we have the right for any territory in West Bank and Jordan Shomeria for every peace. And from that two narratives, we have to come to in the middle to compromise for the narrative and look what's happening now on the field. So the core issues like the security, the borders, the refugees can be solved. With a goodwill, it can be solved. I think also, and I think even the Prime Minister spoke about it in his speech, when he spoke about the new options and which are opening in our area, in our region, because of what's happening with the extreme radical ISIS and split groups of Al-Qaeda, which are taking over, invading to Syria, to Iraq, and even threatening Jordan and some other moderate countries. And this is a dramatic changes in our region. So the main focus of the moderate Arab countries is how to stop this invasion of these radical Islamic groups. In order to be focused on that, they are very much want to be involved with the Palestinians to put a settlement with Israel in a way that the mutual interest that Israel and those moderate countries are holding will come to together, which is the same interest of your country, America. So we think that the influence of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan on the Palestinian Authority, especially on Abbas, can be forced by Americans, by other European groups, which we had discussion. I just was last week at the Parliament of Vienna, and we met with the President of Austria, just discussing those issues in order that those moderate Arab countries can bring a solution to the table, which Israel and the Palestinians can discuss on that. And I think that's going to be the next step. I don't know if Kerry will have the time, the desire, the incentive to come and to do it, because we know that there is a difference between the White House and the State Department on the how and if to move forward. I'm not saying about the formula, which is probably they're sharing the same, but the incentive or the willing to step in.
You know, it's always valuable for us at J Street here in the United States to hear the perspective of somebody like yourself who is a veteran of the military and rose to a high rank. And we were talking before about the demographic issue that faces Israel in terms of continuing the occupation. So maybe for our people, our viewers, you could outline your view about that.
But my view is, you know, as you said, I was born in Turkey, raised in Ashkelon, and for me, the Jewish state, the democracy state, is the most two fundamental issues which make this country so desirable for me, and for my kids, and for my family, which I want to see the legacy of the Zionist idea was to come and to build a Jewish state, which can be, first of all, the home and the house for every Jew in the world, for our community in Israel, and to remain a Jewish state, a democracy. Now, in order to keep these two main issues, we will have to face either two things. Or we're going to live in one state with the Arabs, like we do for years from 48 till today with the Israeli Arabs, and they have the full rights. They can vote to the parliament, to the Knesset, and be part of us. So the same like this, which the idea of Bennett or Lieberman or the other right, unfortunately the president is holding this kind of opinion today, will be Rivlin. And I didn't vote for him just because of that, because I respect him as a person. He's a great Democrat. He's a honest person, but he believes that in 10 years from now, thousands, if not millions, of Jewish immigrants will come back to Israel. We will remain the majority Jewish in Israel, and we can keep the territories, to keep with the settlements, and to give the full rights to the Palestinian people in the territory. So it means today we are 6 million Jews, there are 5 million Palestinians. In 10 years from now, if we go mathematically, demography, without illusions that millions of Jewish immigrants will come to Israel in 10 years, of course we like and we love every immigrant Jewish coming to Israel, but it doesn't happen, it won't happen probably. And what we will see is in a very few years, like Ahmed Tibi like to say all the time, for us, don't do nothing. The best thing is keep like that. In 10 years, we will be the majority here in this land. And you're right. So we have to take action in order to remain democracy and not to become, which I definitely reject any kind of comparing us to the apartheid state or country like South Africa. So we want to remain democracy with the full rights to the minorities, but as a Jewish state. In order to keep this formula, we have to separate from the Palestinians and to give land, but to keep the Jewish identity and democracy in Israel.
The way I talk about it sometimes when I'm speaking to synagogue groups and others is in terms of the story in the Bible about King Solomon and the two mothers who bring the baby.
But the choice,
you can't cut the baby in half. Let me talk a bit about the aftermath of the war in Gaza, because at the end of the war, everybody was saying we have to do something to give hope to the people of Gaza, to give them some prospects, to have some economic development. And now, a few weeks after, we're not hearing that so much. Do you think anything is going to change for the people of Gaza, or are they going to be stuck in this, I don't want to say the word prison, but in this narrow, confined, crowded territory ruled by Hamas?
Well, it's very, very complicated and difficult. But if you ask me, the key for that is on the hand of Abbas. Not on the hand of the Israeli, not on the international community, not Americans and the European, and not Qatar, and not even Turkey or Egypt. We, from surrounding, although those countries which I mentioned have the goodwill to support the people of Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza. We are making very clear line between Hamas, which are controlling and ruling in a very dictatorial way, forcing their belief, it's like a gang. If we're talking about only the money, which is coming, the contribution from all over the world, especially Qatar and the other countries which are contributing to Khaled Mashal. Every year, about $600 to $800 million were coming to Gaza, mainly to be armed tunnels and to not to the prosperity, not to schools, not to very few of that is going to that, to the prosperity of the people. Khaled Mashal is sitting in a private bank account, which there are more than $2.5 billion in his account, which supposedly was supposed to come to Gaza to support the people. So what we think that the international community have to insist on the reconstruction of Gaza and to support the people of Palestinian in Gaza by project, not by suitcase coming from Qatar with millions of dollars, going half of it to the pocket of Khaled Mashal and half of it to some of it to Hania, and Hania is only holding in his private account $600 million.
Where are these accounts based?
All over.
All over.
Bank, Arab banks, and
where does this figure come from? $2.5 billion.
It's a true figure. It's a true figure. And what we think is they have to go through projects to build the houses for those people, to give them food, to give them schools, to educate, not to incitement. Not all those projects are very important for the future because we're growing into hate in Gaza and also in the Jordan and Samaria because of the lack of any incentive of the leadership to take care of the people.
And when we're talking about hate, David, let me ask you about the very ugly phenomenon that we saw after the discovery of the bodies of the 3 murdered teenagers, the abduction and the brutal murder of the Palestinian teenager Mohammed Khadir, and what happened with Palestinians being chased off the buses in Jerusalem and the kind of groups going on. What is the source of that hatred and intolerance, which seems from this perspective to be so ugly and so counter to the values on which Israel was founded?
Well, first of all, I'm the chairman at the Knesset for the subcommittee against racism and violence, especially on sport and large sport events. And I'm very much, I can tell you that I was very worried, and I expressed how ugly and how it's unacceptable, those kind of incidents. Not talking about, of course, the murder of the kid of Mohammed Abu Khadir, which the police did a very, very quick and they caught them. But that grows in an environment which some of the frustration, some of the incitement, I can tell, coming from the right, and sometimes the words can affect so hardly those people. Of course, everybody was in a big sorry and grief and emotional when we had 74 of our people who died in this war. But it doesn't justify any kind, in any meaning, this kind of events. We took some measures, as you said before. Tzipi also is the Minister of Justice. And me, my background is coming from law enforcement and public security. So we took quite a lot of measures, even in legislation, but also by very vocal against it. The Prime Minister even spoke about it very vocally, which I have to say he did it very nice. And I think this is one of the things we have to recover very quickly with the Israeli Arabs, especially, and in East Jerusalem, because, you know, I can tell you that I live in Tel Aviv, but Jaffa is like my neighborhood, and I come quite a lot. And on this area, Jaffa, Akko, you didn't see it so much. Unfortunately, it was something which was seen very much in East Jerusalem, which part of it also was because of they were very much, as I say, emotion, and also the East Jerusalem was very much identified with the fighting going on in Gaza. So this was for of course, it doesn't justify any kind of violence from the people, but the police had a very important role, I think, in trying to stop it. We're still having problem in the Temple Mount every day. I'm also the chairman of the subcommittee for the Temple Mount, which is a very sensitive issue in Israel. So we still have quite a lot of things to do.
It reminds me that Saib Barakat once, I think, famously told Tzipi Livni, I believe, speaking of the Palestinians, "You don't see us, we're invisible to you." And I guess my last question to you, David, is, do Israelis see Palestinians anymore? They don't go much to the West Bank. I have the impression that Berlin is a lot closer to Tel Aviv than Ramallah or Nablus. Are the Palestinians, have they become invisible as far as Israelis are concerned?
In a way, the West Bank is almost out of the territories for Israelis because of security. I can tell you that there were times that a lot of people were going there because it's cheaper, it's nice to make shopping there, etc. But unfortunately, the terror activities there made it impossible for the Jewish people to go and visit. And it's also forbidden by law because, again, of security issues. East Jerusalem is something which is open for everyone. And you can see, it depends on the time. Sometimes more tourists coming, and also the Israelis are so dependent on this economically. So the majority of the people, especially the Israeli Arabs and also in East Jerusalem, they don't want troubles. They want peace, and the business will remain, make a living. So I think the roots of the positive roots are there. We can create an atmosphere which, especially when we're looking what's happening surrounding us, we have so many things to take care. Iran remains main threat of the existence of Israel. Those fundamentalist Islamic groups, the moment they will finish killing them, butchering the Muslims in their places, they will come to Israel. Definitely, they will come to Israel or to the West. Yesterday only, we saw that they blow up the French cultural center in Gaza, which was very unusual for the Salafis to act in Gaza. Hamas kind of doesn't want to talk about it, but it happened. So I'm saying that we have to locate the moderate movements and to make the peace and to agreements with them, and not to wait till all the regimes become more and more Islamic fundamentalists. So I think the timing is very, very crucial. It's not something that we can remain on that, the status quo is good for us and the time is working for us. No, they're working against us. So we have to be proactive and not passive.
My last question is, what can we at J Street do to help those of you in the peace camp in Israel? How can we be of assistance?
First of all, I really appreciate your role. It's not obvious. I think it's more easy and convenience to be, supporting Israel all the time and playing this role. It's not easy. I had my talk with Jeremy, and I said that I know that even the Prime Minister and some ministers doesn't want to talk with your organization because you kind of criticizing sometimes or taking this position of. In my perspective, it's very important to hear these voices. I think that our relation and connection with the Jewish community here in the state is a very, very important. I know that there are more issues than settlements, occupation, or peace agreement, which are bothering the Jewish community. The identity of the Jewish community is here. The non-recognition of some of the process that you're going here. Israel is a secular society. Sometimes it looks strange, but Israel is a mainly secular society. We are not Orthodox, although we gave up almost most of the things to the Orthodox. And our party maybe is the leader today, the coalition, to try to stop this process. We put in legislation which is frustrating sometimes the government because of that. So I think it's a very important your role. If I may put a line, which I think this is a very important for us and for any Israeli, is all the legitimate of Israel, the boycott, the BDS movements, which sometimes even they wanted to connect your organization to that, and I clearly had a very clear voice from Jeremy and others who said, no way, we are not there. So this is very important. So we can get, we sometimes we criticize more our government than you, but we can accept the criticism, this dialogue, to hear, not only to hug us and to support by money, because we understand that you have very important. We see ourselves, in our opinion, as the Jewish state for Israelis and for all the Jewish in the world, in every place. So that's why we have to be open for any kind of opinion.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you stopping by our office. I appreciate your friendship, and we look forward to more conversations. And let me just finish by saying that we're going to try and reschedule Akiva Eldad. We had a call with him last week that had to be cut short because of technical issues. We're going to try and reschedule that for the week after next, and we'll be sending out details by email. To close, I want to wish everyone a very happy Sukkot, Chag Sameach, Moadim L'Simcha, and until we meet again. So thank you.
Chag Sameach.
Did I get it?